Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Inuit, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. I'll introduce the members of the panel today. Via Zoom is Ms. Gail Anderson and Mr. Maurice Therian. My name is Stu McPherson. I'll be chairing the panel today. The secretary is Mr. Jason Robertson, and representing the City of Winnipeg Assessment Taxation Department is Mr. Clayton Deitchen. We'll be hearing applications for the revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We'll limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council. It's independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they so wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave and the process will repeat for each item on the docket. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the Board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We'll be hearing items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on our docket today. Mr. Robertson, would you please affirm the assessor and the applicant's testimony?
Certainly. Mr. Applicant? Sorry. Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Clayton Deitchen.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name. Jared Story. Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Story. You're here representing the owners for the first 3 properties on the docket, and it's the amount of assessed value that we're dealing with. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I thank you. We'll just deal with them as they're listed on the docket. So the first property we will deal with is 1280 Aberdeen. So, Mr. Deitchen, when you're ready, we'll hear your evidence, please.
File number 221102, roll number 14100123555. Address is 1280 Aberdeen, and I have a recommendation at NOI of $28,982, cap rate of 6.75%, giving us the value of $429,000.
I'm sorry, would you repeat those numbers? The NOI
28,982.
Thank you. And your cap rate?
6.75%.
Thank you. So your revised value is
$429,000.
And that's your recommended value?
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Story, you're aware of the recommendation?
I am. We are in agreement, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns, Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Mr. Therian?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, we can move on to the next item, which is 1286 Aberdeen. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor.
It's file number 221103. Roll number is 14100123560. Address is 1286 Aberdeen, and I have a recommendation on this one at a NOI of 108,346 and at a cap rate of 6.75%, bringing the new value to 1,605,000.
Thank you. Mr. Story, you're aware of this and you're in agreement?
Precisely, sir. We are in agreement with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or concerns, Ms. Anderson?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Therian?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that will bring us to the third item on our docket, which is 150 Adsum. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear your evidence, please.
File number 222453. Roll number is 0500455890. Address is 150 Adsum Drive. Assessed value is $4,829,000. Is one building 3 stories high, built in 1975. 61 suites with 70 outdoor parking stalls. Page 3 is the income value summary. Shows we have 24 one-bedrooms, 36 two-bedrooms, for a total of 60 units at an average monthly rent of $841.85. Her gross effective income is $580,674. Expenses $329,591. Gives us an NOI of $251,083. Cap rate is at 5.2%. Gives us a value of $4,829,000. Page 4 is the rent comparables for the property. Tried to find some properties built around the same time, similar suite mixes in the same area. You can see it falls near the bottom of the range of average monthly rent per unit. Page 5 is the cap rate evidence. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose is to show these individual cap rates to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived cap rates. And you can see the range of cap rates that we have here, from 3.6% to 4.79%. Page 6 is our cap rate table, just to show the 20th to 80th percentile of cap rates for our model. Page 8 and forward to page 13 is the income and expense mailers. And then page 14 are just a couple pictures. Unfortunately, no interior pictures of the property. And that is my evidence.
Thank you. Mr. Story, questions for the assessor?
Just have a few, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Mr. Deitchen, can we, or is it, is everything that you've presented here today generated from the model?
That is correct.
So, okay, so nothing is overwritten. It's simply model derived. I see that you've included the income and expense mailers. Did you review them for the purpose of our exercise today?
Briefly, I did.
Okay. Can we agree that the expenses that you're suggesting here are not in line with the performance of the property? Is that a fair comment?
I mean, without looking through each line item, it would be hard for me to say.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Now, I'll ask about this cap rate evidence, and I will ask, we'll probably only have to go through this once today, but in terms of your page 5, it says that the sample of sales illustrate the accuracy of the model, but they actually fall typically outside of the 20th, 80th percentile, do they not?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so the comment here is that these were provided to illustrate the accuracy of the model, but the model is telling us for multifamily that you're suggesting all properties, whether they be high rise, low rise, A's or B's, fall between 4.8 and 5.6, and these are typically outside of those parameters, are they not? Just mathematically.
Sorry, I don't follow the question.
Okay, that's fine. So, okay. 2390 McPhillips, there's been a fair bit of conversation about that, so I won't belabor it, but can we agree that at the time of purchase, through our discussions in this cycle, is it your understanding that at the time of purchase the rents were low and certainly below CMHC?
They were below CMHC, but that's what they were getting.
Okay, that's fine. Now, if mathematically, if we took the income workup of 2390 McPhillips and held all else equal, but the rents were to increase, would that not indeed expand or raise that cap rate?
Are you?
Just from a mathematical perspective, if you hold everything else constant, and if I purchase that property and the rents go up, then that cap rate goes up as well, does it not?
Potentially.
Okay.
Wait, isn't this in your cap rate study that you're gonna present later?
Yeah, no, I'm asking you because we don't have any workups. That's my next question. So in terms of these cap rates, you haven't provided the workups and chief evidence for the owners of the board to review, correct?
No, we have it in rebuttal.
Okay. May I ask why it's not in chief evidence?
I think it would just be way too much information in each brief to have it in there.
Okay. 700 St. Mary's. Now that's a very, very low cap rate. That's falling outside of what you're suggesting is the range. Are you aware that that property was purchased in what we'll call inferior condition, was purchased with the intention to renovate? Are you aware of that?
I am.
Okay. And you're aware, obviously, of the board decisions that suggest that we ought not to use properties that were purchased for the intention to renovate in a cap rate study because they represent a different economic opportunity. Is that a fair comment?
I'm not too sure.
Okay, that's fine. And just lastly, because we are dealing with a mid-1970s build in the Maples, is it safe to say that when we look at the broker's reports here on page 6, if we call this a low-rise A or a low-rise B, that the brokers, CBRE, for example, is suggesting somewhere between 5.25 or 5.5 to 6%? That's in your evidence? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what it says. Yeah.
Okay. I will leave my comments there, Mr. Chair, and I thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, questions for the assessor?
In regards to the number of suites in the building, on page 1, it indicates that there's 61 suites, and then in the workup, it calculates 60 suites. Can you explain why the variance there?
Oh, I actually did not notice that. That'd be something I'd have to look into after.
Okay, and in regards to the model workup, is it all model generated? Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, and so is there a note as to when the last inspection of this property was undertaken?
I could double check. I'm not too sure. This computer doesn't let me load up our notes sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not letting me. I'm not too sure why. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Thurian.
Well, I had the same question as my colleague on the number of suites, but I want to go back to the cap rate, and I think it was raised by the appellant. I was looking at multifamily low-rise between 480 and 560, and on the CBRE line, it's 550 to 6. So I guess the model used the 520 that was in between the 20th and the 80th percentile. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
So whether it's low rise or high rise, it's both the same in your case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I was just trying to confirm that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's model generated. Is it safe to assume that it's normal condition or average condition that was applied to this property?
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Story, we'll hear from you, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. Okay, so as we've established, we're at 150 Adsum. This is the corner of Adsum and Pipeline in Maples. No issues with condition. We've not made any adjustments there. It's a fairly typical mid-1970s suburban apartment in Maples. And there are indeed 61 suites. So 25 one-bedrooms and 36 two-bedroom suites. We've performed a site-specific analysis of this property. I have overhead photos, you can see it. But in terms of our review today, I'll just direct your attention, please, to page 9. We have, as per our normal course of action, when we have robust financial statements, we're able to go through and look at the income, look at the expenses, and stabilize the property's earnings into what we'll call a typical or stabilized year. So I think you're all familiar with our methodology, but ultimately the first thing you'll notice is that our potential rent is higher than the model. The model is suggesting 606, 132. The actual performance is 634 and $20. Market vacancy at this stage in this area at 4.2% is correct. We have no issue with applying that market vacancy. And then we also recognize that this property is picking up some ancillary income by way of laundry, parking, and what they call miscellaneous. And that's captured, Mr. Chair, when we get to line 13 of our workup under our effective gross income, which is 623,421. So we are a fair bit higher than the assessor. Now, the crux of our concern here, and I mentioned it in my questioning, is the model is kicking out a number of 329,591 for the expenses. When you look back, I'm going to suggest on row 31, or I'm sorry, line 31 under total expenses, and if you follow that from the beginning, you can see the expenses every year are in that 425 to roughly 450,000 per year. We have stabilized that at 436,395. So the expenses are fairly high, but that is the actual performance of the property. In terms of the R&M, the repair and maintenance, we've stabilized that at $1,397 per suite. And we have our detailed and itemized breakdown on page 10. So we've done a 5-year average. We've looked at the total R&M. We've backed out the capital expenditures. We've backed out the waste and snow, which leaves us with an R&M per door, as I've mentioned, of $1,397. Again, these are real numbers. This is based on the actual performance of the property. And this is what would be reviewed by an investor, an expert and purchaser from a market perspective. Now, the other issue that we have here is the cap rate. We are suggesting 5.5%. That is right down the middle of what we're typically seeing in this cycle. I'm going to suggest to you that this property, again, is built in the mid-1970s. It's in the Maples. It is a very, say, a common type of apartment in the city of Winnipeg. We've all seen these types of apartments. No issue with condition. So if the low end is 5 or 5.25 and the high end is 6 or higher, then we feel very comfortable at 5.5%. Now, you've all been provided with our capitalization rate study. So every cycle, Altus performs a cap rate study for multifamily and for other asset classes. And I'll go through it very quickly. Our first order of business is to look to what the city is suggesting in their manual. It's called the Evaluation of Income Producing Properties. And in that manual, the city suggests that the wider swath of cap rates range between 3.8 and 7.4%. Okay, and then we then look to the brokers cycle over cycle. Now, I will caution that in some of these broker reports, because they're let's say their intention is somewhat advertorial in nature, we are cautious that sometimes they include closing costs, and when we do factor those in, you may have the market may have higher cap rates than what they're reporting, but they are a good barometer for compression in the market. So in terms of the compression in the market this cycle, we're seeing somewhere between 0 and 25 basis points. Okay, so then when we look to the different properties that we're reviewing and try to apply an appropriate cap rate, we look at various factors, building type and construction. We don't have any issues here, but I do note that it is an older building and it is wood frame. So that's certainly, we haven't made any adjustment, but we do recognize that. We consider amenities. Now this property has balconies and that's good. But ultimately the properties that should fall on the lower end of the cap rate scale, that would be, let's say, lower risk, would typically have a higher degree of amenities, and that's typical of the newer builds, and it's not atypical of the mid-1970s builds to not have things like business spaces and gyms and that sort of thing. We consider age, condition, parking, suite mix. None of those are an issue here. Locations and external factors, and then of course supply and demand. Now, one comment that I will make is that we've seen a great deal of new product coming on stream this cycle. We have, as part of our preparation for our submission for the boards for this cycle, we've looked to the development applications, we've looked to permits, and we've developed a pretty good handle on the what we'll call the development pipeline. So we see a great deal of new product coming on stream, and perhaps that's why we see a small amount of cap rate compression cycle over cycle. I've included some cap rate sales here supporting our position, but ultimately our conclusions for properties that are in that are good quality, that are in good locations. We do bifurcate by age and by high rise or low rise. So all properties, all number of stories built before 1946, we would typically apply a cap rate in the range of 6.1 to 6.6. All properties between 46 and 59 would typically be applied a 5.75 cap. Our property here today would fall into the next range, which is 1960 to 1998 for properties of 1 to 5 stories, and that's going to cover a large swath of the older inventory in Winnipeg. Those are typically applied a 5.5 cap. So I think I will leave my comments on cap rate there, but ultimately, we've performed a site-specific analysis of the property. We've stabilized the expenses. We've provided that to you in great detail. And when we come to our NOI of $187,026, and when we capitalize that with a 5.5 cap, as I'm suggesting, we come to a value of $3,400,479, which we then, of course, round to $3,400,000. And barring any questions, that is my presentation, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Deitcher, questions for the applicant?
Just one. Would you agree that 70% expense ratio is on the very, very high end?
Yeah, it's on the higher end, but we also have a higher effective gross income. So I suppose if you look at it from the perspective of you need to spend more to achieve those higher rents, it makes sense. Yes, I agree. Ultimately, though, we're using 436, and we have expenses, I think, in every year except for 2018 that are, in fact, higher than that. And they're itemized here. These are the actual numbers. This is the actual performance of the property. So, yes, I agree with your comment, but we can't take those expenses and remove them from the fact that our EGI is also fairly high. So those two numbers work in concert.
All right. No further questions.
Ms. Anderson.
My question was in regards to the expense rate too, so it's been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Therian.
Did you inspect this property? Have you been in it?
Well, I did not inspect for the purpose of this cycle, but I have been in it. I grew up in the area and I know this property reasonably well. I have been in it in the past, but not for the purpose of this cycle. But again, sir, we're not making any comments about condition. We're just going to assume that it is in a good condition.
So it's in good condition for a 1975 building?
Yes, sir, and that's reflected in
that's your view.
Yeah, that's reflected in the rents, and it's also reflected in the fact that they are, they're spending money to keep it up. So no issues with condition from our perspective on this property.
Maybe I should ask the assessor, but any building permits taken on this property in the last while?
It doesn't look like it, no.
Doesn't look, and that, would you know, the appellant, would you know if there were any permits?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Not that you're aware of. Okay, that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Story, you had some rebuttal evidence?
No, you know what? I think we're okay. I think I asked the assessor about the cap rates, and I think you've all heard it before, so I think we're comfortable.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Deitchen, did you have rebuttal evidence?
It was a rebuttal to the cap rate study. I don't know. I guess not, because it wasn't really presented.
Okay, thank you. Desire for summation, Mr. Assessor?
No, thank you.
Mr. Story?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, I will ask that the board consider the actuals as opposed to the model. And just to be very clear, I think that 5.5 cap rate is quite fair. So I do respectfully submit that the value not exceed $3,400,000. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Story, I guess those are the three properties you're dealing with. So thank you for your presentations today.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Robertson, we'll have you affirm the the applicant's testimony, please?
Please state your name.
Sarah Faith.
She is the evidence you're about to hear is the truth, the whole truth.
I'm sorry, has the applicant been sworn in?
Yes.
Thank you. Morning, Ms. Cates, is it not?
Good morning.
Morning. And you're here representing the owners for 5 properties, and it's the amount of assessed value that we're dealing with, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. So we'll just deal with them as they're listed on the docket. So the first one we have is 200 Adsum. So when you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear from you, please.
File number 223145, roll number 0500 455 8400. The address is 200 Adsum Drive. I have a recommendation here to reduce the value to $23,714,000 using a 5.6% cap rate and an NOI of $1,327,991. And on page 8 is the workup for that recommendation.
Sorry, what page was that?
8.
Thank you. Ms. Gates, are you aware of this recommendation?
Yes, I'm aware and we are in agreement.
You're in agreement, thank you. Questions or concerns, Ms. Robertson? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Anderson,
No, I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Thiering?
Thank you, I'm fine. 23714, correct?
So, yep.
Thank you. Next we'll deal with is 330 Anderson. So when you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear your evidence, please.
Okay. File numbers 221492, roll number 14042235000. Address is 330 at Anderson Avenue. Assessed value is at $1,869,000. Is one building 2 stories high, built in 1957, with 30 suites and 18 outdoor parking stalls. Page 3, the income value summary shows 19 one-bedrooms and 11 two-bedrooms, giving us 30 total units at an average monthly rent of $707.77. Gross effective income is at $246,643. Expenses at $120,510, giving us an NOI of $126,133. At a cap rate of 6.75%, brings us to the value of $1,869,000. Page 4 is the rent comparables again. Just try to find similar properties with similar suite mixes, year built in the area. You can see it falls at the low end of the range of average monthly rent per unit. Once again, page 5 is the cap rate evidence that supports our model cap rates. Page 6 is the cap rate table showing the 20th to 80th percentile of our model cap rates. Page 8 and forward is the income and expense mailers. for 2020, 2019, and 2018, I believe. And then the pictures from page 15 forward show the interior. You can see that's well kept up. And then going back to the mailers, you can see that if you remove the remit to owners, the NOI is actually declining from 2018 to 2020. The NOI in 2018 is 125K, 2019 is 116,000, and 2020 is around 101. And we're at 126, so it's close, but it's declining oddly over those years. And that is my evidence.
Thank you. Ms. Gates, questions for the assessor?
Just a couple, thank you. So we could see that the actual year built and the effective year built are 1957, which would make the property 65 years old. Is that correct?
Yep.
So your expense ratio on page 3 for your income value summary is 48.86. Had you considered for this property stabilizing the expenses based on the actuals?
I did not have time for that, no.
Okay, thank you. That would conclude my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, questions?
Just to confirm, this was, the assessment is all model generated, is that correct?
Yep.
When was the last inspection of this property?
Sorry, I can't.
Okay, you can't answer that?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
I should have had
okay.
it ready.
What about the photographs? Where did the photographs come from then, of the interior?
That would have been just on a website ad. It looks like I posted the link underneath one of the pictures there.
Okay.
Just pulled them from the website ad, yeah.
Okay. Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
I have no questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. Thank you. So, Ms. Gates, we'll hear your evidence, please.
Okay, thank you. So if you turn to page 2 of my brief, you'll see a summary of some of the facts of the property along with our requested assessment of $1,644,000. On page 4, we have our property description. So the subject property is located on Anderson Avenue between its intersections with Aiken Street and Charles Street in the St. John's area of Winnipeg. The property consists of a 2.5-story apartment block that was built in 1957, and the land area is roughly 28,810 square feet and is zoned R2. The total gross floor area is approximately 26,997 square feet, and the subject property has 30 units, which includes 19 one-bedrooms and 11 two-bedrooms, and there are 36 outdoor parking stalls noted. So I've included an aerial view of the subject property below that. And on page 5, we have a Google map view to get a better sense of the neighborhood. So if you move to page 8, this is an overview of our income approach. So essentially the main issue for this property is the expenses. We are using an expense ratio of 57.9% based on the actual expenses of the property. In terms of the cap rate, we are not disputing the assessor's cap rate of 6.75%, and we will also use that in our valuation. We feel a cap rate's appropriate given that it is an older building. The location does have challenges, so we will also apply that in our valuation. So if you turn to page 9, we have our valuation breakdown. So you see we've stabilized income and expenses based on 3 years of data. And in our remarks column, we've commented if we've used an average or a percentage. In some cases for the expenses, you'll see that we've highlighted certain items in red if that was deemed to be an outlier, and we've noted that in the remarks column. So to go through this, the rents that we're using are $255,021 based on the stabilized income of the subject property. When accounting for other forms of income, that gives us an effective gross income of $263,677. You'll notice for the miscellaneous income, we took an average instead of just using the 2020. And this is standard practice we would use for miscellaneous income when it varies quite a bit, just to maintain accuracy. Regarding our expenses, you'll notice for line item 17 for office supplies, 2020 seemed a bit high, so I removed that from the average, but the other expenses where we take an average has just been done as standard, and where no comment is shown, it could just be assumed we're pulling in the expenses from the most recent year. Our repair and maintenance is stabilized at $1,609 per suite. So that gives us total expenses of $152,689 for an expense ratio of 57.9%, as compared to the model's rate of 48.9%. So with our NOI of $110,988 and our applied cap rate, we have an indicated market value of $1,644,000, which works out to a value of $54,800 per suite. Our appendix starts on page 11, and what we've included is the city valuation, the financial statements, and then for your reference, on page 23, we have our detailed repair and maintenance breakdown. Jarrett had already ran through kind of how we do the breakdown, so I don't want to double the effort there, but this is here for your reference in case you wanted to see any of the inputs that we're using. And then lastly, on page 24 is just our valuation repeated. So that would conclude my presentation for 330 Anderson Avenue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Deitchen, questions?
No questions.
Ms. Anderson, questions?
I have no questions.
Mr. Therian?
Have you been inside this property?
I've not inspected these.
You haven't? Okay. So you're at 57.9 versus 48.9. Just looking at your expenses, it's been averaged out over the year in the last 3 years, correct?
Yes.
The last 4?
Yeah, so certain expenses like professional fees, office supplies, waste and snow, we take an average due to variability, and then expenses where they do tend to go up each year, like insurance, utilities, we tend to just stabilize based on the most recent.
Do you know the condition of this 1957 building?
In terms of our analysis, we're not considering a specific condition adjustment. I'm assuming based on the repair and maintenance and the money they're putting in that it would be in somewhere between average, probably average to good condition, somewhere in that range.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd just like a little clarification on these statements that were provided here on page 13 on. There's notations in red. Is that from the owners or is that something that you have done?
So that is something we have done. Those notations refer to where those expenses have been allocated in our repair and maintenance chart that we have on page 23. So the red is just noting what categories those expenses fall into.
Okay, I just noticed appliance purchase, you have that in red, but appliance repair, you don't. So, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to clarify. So in terms of our categories, like if we turn to page 23, like our categories would be in terms of replacement, like flooring replacement, appliance replacement. So appliance repair, we don't have a specific category for that. So we would put that to the remaining R&M. So just kind of that line item at the bottom of the chart. So that's just the clarification on that one.
I thank you. And that follows through with the rest of the items. If they're in red, they go into a specific red, and otherwise they revert to general.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Pardon me. Is there rebuttal evidence that you wish to present?
I did submit rebuttal. Jarrett kind of spoke to it more so in the form of question, so I don't see the need to present it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And the same with you, Mr. Deitchen. It's not necessary to present your rebuttal.
No.
Thank you. Okay, excuse me. We can move on to the next item on our agenda.
Sorry, can I just summarize real quick?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, by all means.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, touch on it again, but we're already at a 6.75% cap rate, which is extremely high, and that captures a lot of the extra risk that maybe was missed on the expenses. And that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Gates. Did you wish to summarize?
I'm okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we can move on to 765 Aikens then. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor.
File number is 223878. Roll number is 110107555000. The address is 765 Aikens Street. Assessed value is at $6,599,000. It is a class code 40 liability S for school tax exempt. It is one building 9 stories high, built in 1985, with 65 suites and 33 outdoor parking stalls. I have a recommendation actually to reduce the value to $6,106,000 using a 5.35% cap rate and a NOI of $326,657.
Ms. Gates, are you aware of this recommendation?
We are aware of the recommendation, but we would like to proceed on this property.
I thank you. Mr. Deitchen, you may continue with your presentation.
Okay. Page 3 is the income value summary. So there's 57 one-bedrooms, 8 two-bedrooms, giving us 65 total units at an average monthly rent of $898.01. The gross effective income is $671,029, with the expenses at $344,372. Gives us an NOI of $326,657. At the cap rate of 4.95%, gives us a value of $6,599,000. Page 4 is the rent comparables. Oh, once again, just try to find similar suite mixes around the same year built. You can see, once again, it falls near the lower end of the range of average monthly rent per unit, actually well below the range. Page 5 is again the cap rate evidence supporting our model cap rates. Page 6 is the cap rate table showing the 20th to 80th percentile. Page 8 is a permit from 2017. Looks like exterior alterations to install new windows and patio doors on the 6th and 7th floor of the building for looks like about $166,000. Page 9 is another permit, a bit older, from 2010 to repair the balconies of all the balconies actually of the building for around $538,000. Continuing on to page 10 is the income and expense mailers. And then page 12 is some information about the property. See spacious, modern, and refurbished suites. And it talks about some of the amenities, suite amenities, building amenities. And then page 13 and forward is some of the pictures of the suites and the common areas. And that is my evidence.
Thank you. Ms. Gates, questions for the assessor?
Yes, thank you. So for your income value summary on page 3, the model shows a cap rate of 4.95, but you've adjusted it to 5.35. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And regarding the new cap rate, was there a specific method for the adjustment, or is it a bit more general or arbitrary in nature?
Just in general, that these kind of 55 plus buildings require a higher cap rate.
So if we go to your cap rate table on page 6, so we could see your cap rate range. Can you provide any information on the sales that are being used to achieve these rates, such as how many sales were included in what area, high rise versus low rise, etc.?
I don't have that information.
Okay, and the 20th and 80th percentiles are shown as 4.8 to 5.6, but are you aware of what the entire range would be?
Oh, like, no, I'm not too sure. Like the lowest to the highest, like for the outliers.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay, but would it be fair to say that the higher end of the range, moving like beyond the 80th percentile, would be, let's say, for a riskier property?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, so looking at this subject property specifically, would you agree that it doesn't function as a standard market apartment, since many tenants are on a rent geared to income basis?
I mean, it looks like a normal apartment. If it was sold to someone else, they could use it as a regular apartment.
But are you aware that many of the tenants are on a rent geared to income basis?
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
And would you agree that these type of properties then with lower income coming in would have a higher operating expense ratio?
A higher than typical?
Yes.
I guess so, yeah.
So would it be fair to say that this would then make the property riskier?
Sorry, what do you mean by that? Like,
there's lower income coming in, higher expenses to income. That's not how a kind of a standard apartment would function. So would you agree that that would add risk to the property?
yeah, potentially.
Okay. And then if we look at your permits on page 8 and 9 that you've included, those would be from 2010 and 2017. Is that correct?
The permits? Yeah.
And would you agree that the nature of the permits being door, window replacement, balcony repairs would constitute fairly standard replacement or repairs that would need to be done over the life of an apartment?
I wouldn't say necessarily the balconies, because that's usually a pretty big overhaul.
But in terms of properties that have balconies, doing standard repairs and such?
I mean, I wouldn't consider it standard because it's probably done every like 20 or so years.
Okay. That would conclude my questions. And then, Mr. Chair, I would also just request that kind of questions that Jared asked surrounding cap rate just be carried forward to these properties as well.
Asked and answered, yes, thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions for the assessor?
Just in regards to the cap rate that you're recommending be increased to 5.35%. So you looked at that. Do you feel that's the highest that's reasonable for this property?
Yeah.
So it's recognizing. So what does the increase represent in the cap rate? What were you considering when you were increasing it to that rate?
Oh, it's kind of like the applicant was talking about it. With the 55 plus, there is a bit more risk involved, so I applied a higher cap rate to it.
Okay, and with regards to the building permits, you talked about the 2 building permits that are on file on record. So there were inspections done at that time?
I would assume so, but I don't have the information on those.
Okay, and there's also a sale on file, right? It wasn't an open market sale, but there is a sale in your presentation that's noted in 2022.
Yeah, that probably shouldn't be in there at all.
Yeah, I wondered. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. 30.
I guess we're all in the same area. I was also looking at the logic on the switch from 495 to 535. And you had mentioned that the 55 plus was a factor, but you also indicated that if it was up for sale, because the suites wouldn't make a difference on sale, as the way I understood it. In other words, I'm looking at the value as April the 1st, 2021, and if in fact that's what it was worth. I'm just trying to get more logic as to, excuse me, as how we arrive at this cap rate. I'm trying to see what your evidence was and how you're tying that into value as of the 1st of April, 2021.
I just felt that at 495, it was closer to the 20th percentile of cap rates, and I feel like that's a little too low for a property like this. And generally, when we see these kind of 55 pluses, they are slightly higher cap rates. So that was my thought process on it.
But you also indicated that if it was, I'm sorry, I'm a little plugged up this morning, I guess. But you also indicated, from what I understand, that if it was up for sale, it would be worth the same amount because the suites are all set to go.
Right.
Am I correct in my conclusion of what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, there's other factors that went into it. It's a 1985 building that doesn't look like it's, well, they said it was renovated, but like from the interior, it doesn't look too renovated. Looks like closer to the actual year built condition. That takes it into account as well. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm trying to get my understanding a little better. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to belabor the fact, but you said that there was an increase in risk because it's being operated as a 55 plus. What would those factors be? Like, are there special amenities in this building that wouldn't normally be there?
I think there's some sort of special amenities. I'm not 100% sure. I'm trying to see what else there was on here. I guess it was kind of like the applicant was saying, there are rent geared to income. Yeah, just generally we see that these 55 plus buildings are a little more risky.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ms. Gates, we'll hear from you, please.
So if you turn to page 2, you'll see our requested assessment of $5,495,000. On page 4, we have our property description. So the subject property is located on Aiken Street at its intersection with Seven Oaks Avenue in the Jefferson area of Winnipeg. The property consists of a 9-story apartment that was built in 1985. The total gross floor area is approximately 58,331 square feet. And the subject property has 57 one-bedroom units and 8 two-bedroom units for a total of 65 units. And there are 30 parking stalls noted. And the land area is 26,412 square feet and is zoned R2. You'll see an aerial photograph below that, as well on page 5, a Google map view of the neighborhood. So on page 8, we have our overview of our income approach. So the property contains a combination of units at market rents and units that are on a rent year to income basis. So based on this, we have used the city's rents in our valuation. We understand that in rent year to income basis and other social housing, the city's rents are based on a factor of CMHC rents. So we have also applied this methodology here, and that works out to approximately $898 per suite per month. And we're applying a market vacancy of 4.2% as assessed. With social housing and other rent year to income properties, they're not going to experience market vacancies as part of their actuals. So we apply a market vacancy per our methodology. The main issues for this property will be the expenses and the cap rate. So we have applied an expense ratio of 55% based on these actual stabilized expenses of the property. And on page 9, we have an overview of our cap rate discussion. So we are disputing the model cap rate of 4.95 as well as the recommended cap rate of 5.35. We're applying a cap rate of 5.5 based on our cap rate study, which Jarrett has ran through previously. But just as a summary of that study, we have our 2 tables here. So the first table is based on effective year built, and it's assuming good quality properties in good locations. And our second table is all of the factors that we consider for adjustment on a site-specific basis. So in terms of this property specifically, our base cap rate is 5.25 based on being 1985 and a high-rise property. And we have made a 0.25 adjustment, given that it functions as social housing and more specifically seniors housing. There is more risk involved with these type of properties, with rent geared to income specifically having low income tenancy creates risk, and we see higher operating expense ratios for that lower income. And additionally, when we're looking at seniors housing, there's more inherent risk given that the suites are generally a lot smaller. The parking ratio is usually quite low. So if these were to then be sold as market, they only have, they're going to have smaller units. They're skewed to 1 bedrooms. You'll see here 88% 1 bedroom, only 12% 2 bedroom, and additionally only 0.51 stalls per unit for parking. So if you turn to page 11, we have our income valuation breakdown. So basically just covering what we've went through. So we're applying an effective gross income of $671,029 as assessed. And in terms of our expenses, you'll see we've stabilized based on actual expenses with the exception of taxes. Now, given that this property is a 40S and a prospective purchaser couldn't necessarily expect that same tax treatment to continue, we do apply Class Code 20 taxes as part of our valuation for 40S properties. So given these expenses and our repair and maintenance stabilized at $1,577 per suite, we have total expenses of $368,818 for a ratio of 55%. So our NOI is at $302,211. And with our 5.5% cap rate, that gives us an indicated value of $5,495,000, which works out to a value of $84,940 $500 per unit. So in terms of our appendix, so our appendix starts on page 13. I've included some photos. So you'll see the property has fairly basic finishes, but the overall condition of what it is would be somewhere in the average to good range, given that it's an 80s build. And you'll see there's a common area on page 17. On the start of page 18, what we've included is some background for our cap rate adjustments for social housing. So what we have on page 18 is an overview of why these type of properties warrant a higher adjustment. And it has some excerpts from some municipal board orders, which we've included here. So on page 19 is the start of the first municipal board order, which essentially is just referring to the need for lower investment grade properties to have a higher yield, given the presence of 4 factors. Not all factors will be present at all properties, but those factors include low cost or low quality construction, advanced age, declining or blighted neighborhood, and low income tenancy. So I would suggest that low income tenancy would be relevant to this property. And then on page 23, we have the start of an additional municipal board order, which essentially speaks to the idea that for these type of properties, simply applying lower than market rents isn't quite enough to capture the risk of the property, that we also need to adjust the cap rates to account for those extra features. And then for the remaining pages, starting on page 27, we have the city valuation and all of the financial statements that we've used. And then just for your reference, on page 49, we have our repair and maintenance breakdown. We didn't have the detailed breakdown for all of the years, so we've kind of stabilized the repair and maintenance based on the overall R&M, as you'll see on page 49. And then page 50 is just our valuation repeated again for convenience. So that would conclude my presentation on 765 Aiken Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dutchens, questions for the applicant? Sorry, are you muted?
I was muted. Thank you. I guess just to confirm, you applied a 5.5 cap rate to account for risk, but then you applied the 2020 taxes, looking forward to see if someone bought it, that would be what they're looking at, correct? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, just to clarify that point. So for 40S properties, we'll apply the Class Code 20 taxes because a prospective purchaser would expect that special tax treatment to necessarily continue. So that's not really functioning for risk. That's just accounting for realistically what a market participant would expect or forecast to pay in taxes. And the cap rate is kind of how investors would feel about the property capturing risk there.
How come you didn't use the actual vacancy of the property?
So generally for properties that function as social housing, or in this case, have a large chunk of units that are on rent geared to income, they're not going to have market vacancies because people would be waiting to get into like lower income buildings, like to have more affordable housing. So those units are not going to have market vacancy. And so it is our practice for properties like this to use just a market vacancy rate, because a prospective purchaser would be looking at what a market vacancy would be if they were to purchase the property.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson.
Just a question in relation to the expenses, and I certainly appreciate the assessor asked this question as well, just so that I'm clear. So the expense rate that you apply to the property, it's calculated with the realty taxes increased artificially, right? They're not actual? Okay,
It would be
so,
based on if the property was a 20, but based on the same assessment parameters of this particular property. Like the same
So
assessment
this-
value as the property had in 2020.
if they were fully taxable and not school tax exempt, correct? Okay. And then the increase in the cap rate to recognize the risk of the building. Okay. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Therian.
Yes, I guess we have all the same question on taxes, so that's in a way speculative, I guess, if I want to use that term. You're assuming that on sale, it would affect the price, so therefore you've also adjusted the cap. From my understanding, I'm just trying to make sure I got a handle on this.
Yes, I think that's a fair handle. Yeah, it is our standard practice for 40S to use the Class Code 20 taxes, as that would be expected by a prospective purchaser if they weren't going to continue as a 55 plus building. They would be paying Class Code 20 taxes. And we feel the cap rate is quite reasonable with a 0.25 adjustment here to account for some of the limitations with the property, just given the way it's operating, the way it's been built, etc.
Okay, now why, I might have missed this, but why didn't you put the figure of the real estate taxes on for 2020? I see the blank, you had them for 19, 18 and others, but not the 220. You might have commented on that. Maybe I didn't pick it up.
No, you didn't miss it. No, I didn't speak to that specifically. I'll just take a look at the statement. Sometimes the statements differ from year to year, so we don't always have all of the expenses available.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't miss a turn, did I?
Yeah, we just didn't include it. You didn't miss that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Excuse me. Now, this property is entirely social housing?
It's not entirely. They have a mix of units that are at market rents and rent geared to income.
Okay, so it wasn't originally built as social housing then?
I believe it was built as a seniors housing, but potentially not as social housing. But as far as I know, the property has been operating for quite some time with a mix of rent geared to income and market rents. And for your reference too, if you wanted to look at page 37, I've included a rent roll with the names redacted, but you can see next to where those redactions are if there's RGI noted. So just to get a better sense of the mix of that building.
Thank you. Okay, desire for a summation, Mr. Assessor?
No, thank you.
Ms. Applicant?
I'm good as well, thank you.
Okay, at this point, I think we're going to take a short recess, 10 minutes. So let's resume at 10:30. Thank you. I will call the meeting back to order. Next item we have to deal with is number 7 on the docket, which is 200 Enniskillen. So, Mr. Assessor, when you're ready, we'll hear your evidence, please.
File number 222167, roll number 1101020300. Address is 200 Enniskillen Avenue. Assessed value is at $1,259,000. Is a 1 building, 2 stories high, built in 1950 with a small effective age of 1960. There are 11 suites and 5 outdoor parking stalls. Page 3 is an income value summary, and there's 5 1 bedrooms, 6 2 bedrooms, giving us 11 suites at an average monthly rent of $978.95. The gross effective income is $123,794 with expenses at $59,607. brings us to an NOI of 64,187, and applying a 5.1% cap rate gives us a value of $1,259,000. Page 4 again is the rent comparables, similar year built with similar suite mixes in the area. You can see once again it falls at the low end of the range of average monthly rent per unit. Again, page 5 is the cap rate evidence supporting our modeled cap rates. Page 6 is the cap rate table showing the modeled cap rates. Page 8 is a permit. Oh man, this is hard to read. It looks like there's alterations to replace windows and some other work for about $41,000. Page 9 and forward are the income and expense mailers. You can see 2020 NOI 53 grand, 2019 almost 61,000, and then 2018 was around 72,000. So kind of has been declining since 2018. I mean, even if you average those, it's around 62,000. So we're close on our NOI in that regard. Page 17 is kind of some information on the property. You can see it says completely renovated from top to bottom with new kitchens and bathrooms, windows, and mechanical systems. Building exterior is upgraded to eliminate cold drafts during the winter months. HRVs in each unit, laundry, and then some of the suite and building amenities below. And then you could see from page 19 forward is some of the pictures of the suite's interior. And that is my evidence.
Thank you. Ms. Gates, questions?
Yes, thank you. So would you agree that this property is wood frame construction from 1950?
It was built in 1950. There's an effective year built on it. Yep.
Okay, but the overall bones of the building would be from 1950. Would that be correct?
I mean, yeah, I guess the structure is.
And would you agree that wood frame would generally not be considered as high quality as other materials such as masonry or concrete, for example?
Yeah.
And would you agree that wood frame properties tend to carry greater risk due to limitations of the material, for example?
Potentially. I don't know. Without seeing anything on that, I'm not too sure.
Okay. And so then based on what we know about the broker cap rates, not suggesting anything lower than 5, and what we know about the subject property and how it was built, do you think a 5.1% cap rate is actually sufficient to capture the risk of this property?
Yeah, considering the renovations and the extensive work done, I would say yes.
Okay. Thank you. That would conclude my questions on this property.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Just in regards to the renovations, you mentioned one building permit you've included in your presentation, but with regards to the renovations, do you have building permits on file?
I don't think so. I'll double check. I would have put them in here, but let me quickly. Yeah, no, there's nothing regarding any of the work done, unfortunately.
Okay. And that's all my questions then. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thurian?
Yeah, I just had one, and I saw 5 parking stalls. When you establish cap rates, is that, do you know if that's taken into account when there's limited parking? There's 11 suites here, and we've got 5 stalls only. Could you comment on that, please?
I'm not too sure if it does take into account.
Okay, you can't tell me then.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I would have to ask the modelers about that, actually. That's a good question.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So you're referring to the comments here on page 17 I'm assuming this is from a website?
Yeah, yep, right where I got the pictures from.
Okay, and so apartment blocks completely renovated from top to bottom to kitchens, bathrooms, windows, mechanical. So as far as the kitchens and bathrooms, as long as it's not structural, I guess they didn't need permits, but there should be something for mechanical too, should there not?
You would think so, but yeah.
All right.
Generally, when there's like that kind of stuff, electrical, plumbing, that stuff, generally you need permits for it.
Right. And the effective age from 1950 to 1960, do you know whether that was a calculated variant or was it just something that was observed?
That I'm not too sure. I would have to double check the notes, but once again, I can't. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I wish I had that.
Okay, and would that make a difference in the age group as far as I know that age is one of the factors that are considered in a cap rate.
Yep.
Development. Would the 1950 versus 1960 make any difference?
I would think so. I'm not too sure how much, but I would think so, yeah.
Okay. I thank you. Ms. Cates, we'll hear your presentation, please.
So if you turn to page 2, you'll see our requested assessment of $1,178,000. And then on page 3, I've also included an additional exterior photo because it's a corner lot, so just from the other street to get a different perspective. On page 5 is our property description. So the subject property is located on Enniskillen Avenue at its intersection with Main Street in the Jefferson area of Winnipeg. The property consists of a 2.5-story apartment block that was built in 1950 with an effective age of 1960 assigned. The site size is 8,480 square feet and it's zoned RMFL. The total gross floor area is approximately 9,885 square feet. And the subject property has 11 units, which includes 5 one-bedroom units and 6 two-bedrooms. And we have 6 outdoor parking stalls noted. And you'll see an aerial photograph below that. As well, on page 6, we have a Google Map view of the subject neighborhood. So on page 9, we have an overview of our income approach. So the primary issue here is on cap rate. We are disputing the assessor's cap rate of 5.10%. Based on what we know from the brokers, they're suggesting an absolute low end of 5% for low rise, with CBRE actually coming in higher than that. So we feel 5.1% is too low for a property with a structure from 1950 that's wood frame. Wood frame tends to deteriorate at a faster rate, and it's not as high quality of a material. So given the type of construction here, we have applied a slight premium to the cap rate. We have a base cap rate of 5.50% based on the 1960 effective year built. And I've applied a 0.25% premium given the method of construction. Yes, the units have been renovated, but the overall structure is going to be from 1950. And additionally, looking at other factors for this property, there's no real amenities to speak of. The location is potentially high traffic. It's right on the corner lot with Main Street. So we feel a 5.75 is reasonable for this property. If you turn to page 10, you'll see our income valuation breakdown. So our rents are $118,275 based on the actual 2020 performance of the property. We've used a 3-year average vacancy of 4.6%, so not too far off of the model vacancy of 4.2%. And when accounting for the other forms of income, that gives us an effective gross income of $114,978. Our expenses include stabilized repair and maintenance at $701. That is a bit low, but the expenses are what they are, and we've we've used what's been reported here. So that gives us total expenses of $47,715, which works out to a ratio of 41.5%. So our net operating income is then $67,263. And with our 5.75% cap rate, we have an indicated value of $1,170,000, which works out to $106,400 a unit, which would even be on the higher end for a property of this age. So our appendix starts on page 12, and I've included some photos of the subject units. So you can see the interiors have had some renovations, but overall the finishes are still quite basic, not what we're seeing with, new apartments, for example, with higher end appliances, higher end kitchens, etc. And then those photos go up until page 18, and then page 18 is our city valuation that we've used, as well as the financial statements for the property. And then for your reference, on page 29 is our repair and maintenance breakdown. And page 30 would just be our valuation repeated. So that would conclude my presentation on 200 Enniskillen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Deitchen, questions for the applicant?
Just one. How come you didn't use the market vacancy? Because obviously there's a big fluctuation from 2018 to 2020 from negative 0.1% to all the way to 10.8%, probably due to the renovations.
Yeah, there definitely is a fluctuation in vacancy. So due to that, we felt it made sense to use the 3-year average rather than from the year, for example. And we're not too far off from the city's vacancy of 4.2%. So I feel comfortable with the vacancy rate used.
Okay, no further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Just in regards to the cap rate, can you highlight for me why you indicate that a cap rate of 5.75% would be reasonable for this property?
Yeah, for sure. So our base cap rate here is 5.5. And when we're looking at what the range that the brokers suggest, anything from 5 to 6 would be for investment grade properties for low rise. So I feel 5.75 makes sense considering this property is quite aged, and it's not built to as high of a construction standard, given that it's wood frame, versus the one we're going to be seeing next, which is masonry, where no adjustment was made. So that would be my clarification on the cap rates and the adjustment there.
Okay, despite it being completely redone inside, I certainly appreciate that it's not high grade finishes you've identified, but it has been completely upgraded inside and the windows have been replaced, right?
Yeah, it has been renovated inside and replacements such as what you've mentioned, but the structure of it is still going to be unique to 1950.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Therion?
Yes, I'm on the same vein here. Page 9, I was looking at your cap rates, and the base, as you mentioned, is 5.5. But where can you justify the 575? If I look at the comments, there's a few comments you've made. It looks like you've put average as good, wood frame, but I think my colleague raised the aspect of the condition. Could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit? Because I'm looking at that chart here and on page 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the property has both positives and negatives to it. The condition of the interior could be stated as good. They are basic, but for what they are, it is good. But there's some deficiencies with the property too, like the parking is quite low. I mean, 1-to-1 is usually kind of an absolute minimum for what we're looking at. This is at 0.55 stalls per unit. So that's a deficiency. In terms of building amenities, properties like this really offer no amenities. And if they're competing with newer properties that are going to have more amenities, that's kind of a downfall of the property. And then overall, the construction type is also something that we look at. So for wood frame, I wouldn't always do an adjustment. If it was newer, I wouldn't do an adjustment. But given its age, I think that's a fair adjustment there. So I hope that provides some more clarification. Let me know if not.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just a little clarification here on the vacancy. I had the same consideration or same concern, but make the assumption that 2020 there was a high vacancy because there was renovations taking place at the time. So as people move out, they renovate the suites. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would probably be a fair statement.
Okay.
Not completely sure the cause of the 10.8% vacancy, which is why we've chosen to use the 3-year average just to balance that out a bit. But I think we're pretty close with the city on the actual vacancy amount.
Right, and I'm just curious, how's it 2018? How do you get a negative vacancy on a property?
Sometimes what happens, what we found with some of the properties is that the way they enter, because the owners receive a questionnaire where they're putting what their rents would be at 100% occupancy, and then they're also receiving a mailer. So sometimes there's just a bit of a disconnect. In those being filled out. So what we pay more attention to is kind of our effective gross rents and our effective gross income in those cases.
Okay, thank you. And your adjustment on your cap rate from your 5.5 standard is primarily because of the wood frame structure itself?
I would say primarily, but I would say there's also other support from the features that would support a higher cap rate while still being within an acceptable range of what the brokers suggest as reasonable for investment grade.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Dychen, desire for summation on this property?
No, thank you.
Ms. Gates?
I'm good also, thank you.
Thank you. We'll bring us to the last property on our docket, 300 Enniskillen. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor, you may proceed.
File number 222510, roll number 110103340000. Address is 300 Enniskillen Avenue. Assessed value is at $1,089,000. It is one building, 2 stories high, built in 1953 with an effective year built of 1982. There are 11 suites and 4 outdoor parking stalls. You can see that there's a sale on here. I'll talk about that a little bit later on page 2. Page 3 is the income value summary. There are 6 1-bedrooms, 5 2-bedrooms, for a total of 11 units at $815.54 average monthly rent per unit. The gross effective income is $103,130. Expenses $54,000 or $51,947. Gives us an NOI of $51,183 at a cap rate of 4.70%. Brings us to the value of $1,089,000. Again, page 4 is the rent comparables, similar suite mixes and year built. You can see that the average monthly rent again falls well below the range of the sales there. Page 5 is the cap rate evidence. supporting our cap or model cap rates. Page 6 is the cap rate table for our modeled cap rates. Page 8 is page 8 and 9 are the income and expense mailers. You can see once you remove the mortgage interest, the NOI is around 53,000, and ours is around 51,000. So we're close. Page 10 is the sales questionnaire. So you can see that it was at 900,000. There was a market value appraisal report for 920. It was not associated or related or anything. It was at arm's length. And that was in 2011, so over 10 years ago. And we're only at $1,089,000 right now. Page 11 is just a listing that they had on. It was just mostly just to look at the description at the bottom, kind of just to see the work that was done. So you could see boiler and hot water tank 2010, bricks repointed and metal 2016, upgraded security doors and intercom 2021, and some other work that was done then. And then page 12 is kind of another listing I was able to find. It's kind of hard to read, but you can see many upgrades including windows, copper plumbing, electrical flooring, washrooms, public areas, and high efficiency boiler and hot water system. And then the last page is just a couple exterior photos. Unfortunately, no interior photos were available. And that is my evidence.
Thank you. Ms. Gates, questions for the assessor?
Yes, thank you. So on your income value summary on page 3, you have a cap rate for this property of 4.7. Would you agree that a 4.7 cap rate would even be considered low for a brand new apartment full of amenities?
Not necessarily, no.
Wouldn't agree with that, even though your cap rate on McPhillips you've worked up as 4.79, and that would be pretty well brand new with a lot of amenities, underground parking, etc.
It's hard to compare the two. They're not the same type of building or anything like that.
Okay. That would conclude my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Thury?
Yeah, well, I was looking at the cap rate as well, and on the chart on page 6, I thought it was a pretty aggressive rate, but I guess it's model generated is because the lowest is 480, and I see no 470s. So could you comment on that?
Sometimes they like not everything falls within that range. I know a lot of these smaller ones generally have a lower cap rate because I think it just kind of the risk is lower. There's a bigger pool of people that would be willing to buy these smaller type buildings, I guess. Yeah, and that's hopefully that helps here.
Yeah, and there's only 4 parking stalls as well, so I was looking at that, but you answered a question on that before. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I reading this brief correctly? The actual year built was 1953 originally?
Yes.
And then the variant was 29-year variant to 1982?
Correct.
So there was work done, obviously. You showed us in the listing, said that there was several things that were upgraded, but a 29-year variant seems like quite a jump, does it not?
I guess the assessor warranted that. I know there was an inspection back in, I think it was 2011 or 2012. I can't remember off the top of my head. And I guess they deemed that necessary.
Okay, windows, plumbing, electrical.
Yeah.
Washroom.
Seems pretty extensive.
Yeah. Okay. I thank you. Ms. Gates, we'll hear from you, please.
So if you turn to page 2, you'll see our requested assessment of $875,000. On page 4, we have our property description. So the subject property is located on Enniskillen Avenue at its intersection with Salter Street in the Jefferson area of Winnipeg. The property consists of a 2.5-story apartment block that was built in 1953 with an effective age of 1982 assigned. And the site size is 6,623 square feet and is zoned R1M. The total gross floor area is approximately 10,962 square feet. And the property has 11 units, which includes 6 one-bedrooms and 5 two-bedrooms. And we note 3 outdoor parking stalls. And you'll see an aerial photograph as well on page 5 is a Google map view of the neighborhood. So on page 8, we have an overview of our income approach. So the primary contention here is on cap rate. We are disputing the assessor's cap rate of 4.70%. And we are using a cap rate of 5.50% based on our cap rate study. So with using the effective age of 1982, our base cap rate is 5.50%. And we note the property has a mix of kind of pros and cons. Masonry construction is better quality build, but there are still no amenities, still deficient in parking, but we've not made an adjustment in this case. So we're at our 5.5% cap rate. As I kind of alluded to in questioning, a 4.70% cap rate would be very low even for brand new apartments with a lot of amenities. And this idea that was mentioned by the assessor that these kind of smaller apartments create a bigger pool of purchasers. Being an apartment investor is a very specific thing. It's not as if there's going to be lineups of people waiting to buy an apartment, waiting to get into that market. So the idea that that's going to substantially lower the cap rate to this level based on competition is not what we're seeing here. So if you turn to page 9, we have our valuation breakdown. So we are using market rents of $104,964. We are applying a market vacancy rate as assessed of 4.2%. I acknowledge the actuals of the vacancy are lower, but in terms of if a prospective purchaser was looking at this property, they can't reasonably anticipate that the vacancy is going to remain at 1% for the long term of the property, and they would apply a market vacancy rate to be conservative. So that's what we've done here. And when accounting for the other forms of income, we have an effective gross income of $103,835. Our expenses include stabilized repair and maintenance at $1,142 per suite. Our total expenses are $55,721, which is a ratio of 53.7%. So our NOI is fairly similar to what the city has. We're at $48,113, and with our 5.5% cap rate, we have an indicated value of $875,000. That works out to $79,500 per unit. And on page 11 is the start of our appendix. So what we've included is the city valuation as well as the financial statements that we've used. Our repair and maintenance breakdown is on page 18. And that would conclude my presentation for 300 Enniskillen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dykchen, questions for the applicant?
I know you touched on it briefly, but I see you use 4.2% vacancy. Would you not agree that 3-year average is a good indication of what they are actually getting for vacancy?
The 3-year average is definitely something that should be looked at. But as I mentioned, our methodology, it is our practice to put a market vacancy rate on properties because someone looking to purchase this property can't reasonably assume that a 1% vacancy is going to occur over the long term of the property. So I hope that clarifies that. Let me know.
But why not though? Like they're obviously getting it. Even 2017 is pretty low as well.
Like that's our methodology of what we're doing. So
Oh,
I
sure.
comment on that.
Okay. It just seems like you apply the market rate when it's too low, and if it's too high, you use the actuals. So, anyways, I'll continue on. Actually, I think that was all my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Just in regards to the valuation that you've proposed of $875,000, that aligns with the sale that was in 2011. Do you not believe that there is an increase in the value of the property since that time?
I would say the sale price, when we're looking at it, is just one element to look at. I wouldn't base the entire valuation on just the sale price alone. So I would say it is something to look at, but I'm comfortable with the value because we're basing it off of the actual income and expenses of the property as it stands today.
And then to the property hasn't had vacancies in the last number of years, right? As the assessor indicated, there hasn't been vacancies in that building. It's been very low, right?
The vacancy's been quite low, but when we look, the rents have also been quite low. Kind of have an average here of $795. So that would be a contributing factor.
Mm-hmm. And so the rent really reflects the size of the property, the size of the apartment, and as well that limited parking, right? There's only the 4 stalls.
Yeah, the rents would be what they assessed as what they could get for the property.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Thurian?
Yeah, I'm sorry, my iPad is ringing at the same time as my phone. Sorry about that. Yeah, I had the same question as my colleague. You're saying that the assessment of 875 is based on actuals and cap rates and so on, but I guess I have the same concern. 900,000 building. Are you saying that it's because I also look at market? What will the market pay on the 1st of April 2021? So are you telling us that this would go for a lower rate than the 900,000?
I'm not necessarily suggesting that the market has gone down for the apartments. I'm just suggesting that the sale price is just one aspect of it, and we're not going to base the entire valuation on just the sale price of what one purchaser had paid for that property at that time. Especially too, if we're looking at cases where it's kind of smaller players that get involved in it, the sale price isn't always a complete reflection of the property's value as of our reference date.
But will you not agree that smaller players also look at buildings of that size? Because I'm not sure that's a factor.
Yeah, I would agree that they're looking at buildings of the size. I guess I'm just saying I don't think the sale price can be the only thing that we're considering.
Okay, that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on your workup on page 9, I'm looking at the total expenses. You've stabilized them at $55,721, but that number seems to be higher than any of the expenses for the years that you've used. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, we've stabilized the expenses at that value that you stated. Some of our expenses are averages, and then the rest are being stabilized based the most recent year, so they're not always going to match what we have for each of the individual years.
Right, but does it make sense that the stabilized expenses are higher than any expenses for the previous years?
I think it can.
Okay.
Certain costs have continued to escalate, but then we also take averages, and there could have been higher costs in previous years. Like, for example, you know, like some years are just a bit higher, like office supplies is a bit higher in 2019. So I guess because the stabilized column is taking a combination of those. So I think it is possible.
Okay, I thank you. Desire for summation, Mr. Dutchin.
Yeah, I guess I'll just touch on it again. With the sale in 2011 at 900,000, that's a good indication of market value. That's 10 years ago, or 11, 12. And we know how the market's been going since then, and no knowledgeable seller would sell it for less than what they bought 12 years ago. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Desire for summation.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I thank you both for your presentations today. We have heard all the items that are scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.